discussion from Bengaluru. Make in India. Now that's a much talked about concept, a much talked about program. But what is the relevance of Make in India for Indian science? What really needs to be done to make scientific research and science in India that much healthier? Joining us to discuss today, we have a great panel. We have Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, Chairperson and Managing Director of Biocon. N.R. Narayan Murthy, he is President Board of Trustees of the Infosys Science Foundation. Professor B. Balaram, a biochemist and a former director of the Indian Institute of Science. And Professor Satyajit Mayer from the National Center for Biological Sciences and an earlier winner of the Infosys Prize for Life Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Now, Make in India. I think most recently that whole Mangalyaan project was very exciting for all involved. That spacecraft being put in orbit around Mars on the first attempt by India. And although we try not to go too much by foreign commendation, Time magazine has also listed it among the 25 great inventions of 2014. And has mentioned as well that India brought it in with a budget of less than the film Gravity. They managed to do that. What kind of difference, to start on a positive note, what kind of difference do you think Mangalyaan made to the feeling of researchers, scientists, of achievement in India? Kiran?
Well, I think it brought in a huge amount of euphoria in the scientific world, in space research. I think young people at least started understanding the importance of, innovation, research. And I think this Mangalyaan success was certainly something that was celebrated and something that we need to leverage really to really inculcate this spirit of scientific research and scientific curiosity, and also the realization and recognition that India does have the scientific potential to innovate and to do great things. And to me, the underlying message is that India has a unique opportunity to position itself as a country that can innovate in a very affordable, cost-competitive way.
I may be somewhat heretic. To me, Mangalyaan is not so much the result of leading edge research. Okay. I think this is an old technology. What Mangalyaan did was to raise the confidence of Indians that we can execute projects well. Okay. To me, Mangalyaan is a very good example of frugal engineering on one hand. Second, a wonderful example of how you can execute such a precision-oriented project well.
How is it perceived in the scientific field? Was it, as he said, not such new science after all? Or do you feel it was a sense of encouragement for young researchers?
Now, the Mangalyaan moment is rather like India winning the World Cup final. Or when Abhinav Bindra won the gold medal, it gave all of us a great kick.
Okay.
And watching it live on TV, I think would have excited almost anybody who was had their sets on.
Even cynics who question the cost of space program.
Even cynics who question the cost of the space program. And I think it's a technological achievement. It says that how far Indian engineering and Indian technology has moved. There is a difference between the kind of basic science that is practiced in academic institutions and the kind of targeted engineering success that is achieved by the space program. But I think there's no doubt that Mangalyaan was a shot in the arm for everybody.
Professor Mayer, your thoughts?
It wasn't really a matter of excellent science, but it was a matter of execution and fabulous engineering, affordable as well. But what I'm really happy about is that it worked. Now, had it not worked, I think first of all we may not be having this conversation, but there might have been repercussions in the context of the support that science desperately needs today.
When I spoke to Professor Kasturi Rangan, he did believe that there was a lot of innovation that went into that project. There was a lot of very complex mathematical and computational science that required to understand the very, very complex alignment of gravitational forces. Some of it was unknown. And I think to that effect, I would say that there was a lot of science and computational science which was involved in that mission.
I mean, in this case, we can't say it's not rocket science because it was.
That's a good one. No, but
like Mangalyaan, another buzzword or buzz phrase was "Make in India." What does it mean to research science in the country? Does it mean anything, or is research science in one corner and the whole "Make in India" hype on the other, Professor Nair?
But I think the connection between innovation that Kiran was just talking about and research is something that needs to be established in India if we are going to truly make in India. If research can contribute to what is being made in India, that would be, I think, something substantial that Make in India could bring. But the quantum of research that's happening in this country is so low in terms of contributing to the possibility of innovation and research, innovation and Make in India, that unless we grow that sector, it's not going to truly be Make in India. We will bring in things from the outside and then innovate.
Yes, I think Make in India is the latest in a long list of slogans that have been coined by people who make opinion. I don't think science really is directly connected with the Make in India slogan. You would realize this by things which have happened recently. The media, for example, views science and technology as the least important of all subjects to which politicians aspire. The last occasions when a minister has been appointed in the Science and Technology Ministry, the press has always viewed it as a demotion. And as a result, this really tells you what the public perception of science and technology is in India. And I suspect that this perception is also shared by the people who run the country.
There's something similar with the Women and Child Development Ministry, which is also a very unfortunate thing. Is funding a big issue? Do you think this whole focus on getting things done in India, whether it's research, whether it's manufacturing, but here we're talking about research, has it led to greater funding? Do you think that the Indian government is really putting its money where its mouth is and giving greater funding to research and industry? Kiran, what do you feel?
Well, you know, if you want to go by statistics, I think India invests about 0.6% of its GDP in research.
0.6%.
You know, compared to say 3% in the US and maybe 6% in Scandinavia and what have you. But that's not the point. I think I really want to take off from where Professor Balram made that very, very poignant point, that we just don't, you know, focus on science and technology and give it its due position and respect in society. And I think that's what I think is the real flawed aspect of what we're talking about. Science and technology has been relegated to a very secondary position, because I think even when you look at young aspiring and you ask them, would you like to be a scientist? I think you will find very few takers. I always sort of have this great altercation with media saying you don't cover science enough. You don't educate people enough about science and arouse the scientific curiosity in minds. Because I think the one thing India really suffers from, because as you said, what is the connect between scientific and Make in India? It's about taking ideas and scientific concepts and scientific ideas to the market. Okay, that's from an industry point of view, that's what it is. Because it starts with scientific concepts. You know, basic research is so very, very important to basically breed, you know, applied science.
Has there been any recently? Is there more funding given now to research institutes, to government research institutes like yours?
See, funding has increased steadily over the years. So over the last 10 years, I think funding has gotten better. But the problem in India always is that it's not the funds which are allocated to an area, but the entire governmental machinery by these funds are dispersed and utilized in institutions is a very, very cumbersome process.
All right.
So very often in India, I think we get much less value for the money that we are spending. we take much longer periods of time in order to spend money that is allocated to us. Government departments function slowly. Institutions, and I can say this, also are to blame. They also function slowly. So I wouldn't say that funding is the only thing that is going to improve the state of science in India. We need more funding, but we need a lot of other things too. I would think if there was far greater autonomy of functioning for scientific research institutions within the budgets that they have, I think it would make a lot of difference.
Do you feel that whether it's when industry is funding you, perhaps industry does, you do have some collaborations, does it fund for pure research, or is it really only when it comes to things which can be applied commercially?
We have sort of open-ended funding that's coming for completely blue skies work as Pribot, which is very recent and extremely welcome. Quantum of funds for basic research, let's say in a country like America or even Japan, is huge. It's so we think that there's a lot of money going into basic research from the government in the United States, but about 70% of funding I think comes from industry.
So
for basic research. So there's a lot of private funding for basic research.
What would you say it is in India in terms of?
I'd say less than 1%.
Thank you. We'll take a short break now, but when we get back, we'll have some questions for the panelists from the students and young professionals present in the audience as we talk about Make in India and what it means for Indian science. Welcome back. We've been talking about Indian science, the Make in India concept, and what relevance it really has for scientific research in India. And now time for questions from this young audience. For the panelists, what's your question?
My question is to Kiran ma'am. You travel around quite a bit. This euphoria that we're feeling in India right now, that's the topic we started with. Is this a global phenomenon? Are you hearing chatter and people talking about this around the world, or is this only something Indians are going crazy about?
Well, I have to be very honest, Mangalyaan, which we thought was a big event in India, I was in the US very recently and most people hadn't even heard about it. So I think there is a need for us to basically raise our voices in terms of what we are trying to do and what we will do and what we are achieving in a much bigger way.
Not too many Americans and Japanese corporates are willing to lay their manufacturing bases in India because they consider India is in corruption.
Why companies don't come and set up their manufacturing bases in India is largely on account of the very poor infrastructure we have to support high-end manufacturing. If that can be addressed, believe me, you will see a lot of manufacturing coming this way. But having said that, now the US also is beginning to focus on manufacturing in the US. So I think we have to make this a very investor friendly, and this whole thing of ease of doing business that our Prime Minister is talking about has to happen.
Basic issue is, yes, infrastructure, but as important is the slow decision making and the bureaucracy in India. Let me give you some examples. It is more than 10 years since we have been talking about so-called innovation universities. Nothing has happened. No country will take 10 years to decide on that. It's not controversial, it's not hurting anybody, it's only ourselves. It's only helping us. If we all learn to act as if there is no tomorrow, then let me assure you, you may not infrastructure, they will come and build the infrastructure. If you can make building that infrastructure approvals quick, they will build. There is no problem. But our problem is, as a culture, we are not used to doing things with a sense of alacrity.
I secured 98.4 percentile in GATE, but coming in the top 2 percentile of all those who appeared wasn't enough to secure a place in the research institutions. So I want to know the reason why this demotivating wide gap between the limited seats and the high number of aspirants.
Our entrance procedures are certainly the most demotivating for many students. Unfortunately, in India, we have no other way other than having these entrance examinations, because the number of students vying for these seats and the number of seats available is very small. I think in India, the One of the most complex areas for the future is the area of education. And the area of education actually underpins all scientific research and development. And we desperately need to pay attention to this. Unfortunately, we can't take motivated students whom we decide, because we would then be immediately accused of favoring someone or the other, which is why we have this absolutely impersonal examination system. In our computer science program at the Institute, students who get 99 plus percentile in the GATE examination because there are 20-30 seats, and they're all very good students.
The largest number of young people in the world today is in India, and if we are not going to provide the possibility of these young minds an option for excellent research, I think the fate of the world is doomed, let alone India.
Now in a Make in India campaign is currently underway. So we see that there is a gap of substantial gap, because China currently stands at around 45% of their workforce being women. So how are we going to bridge this gap?
There are very few women who are willing to come into the manufacturing sector because there is a certain societal mindset and prejudice about these kind of skills and jobs which don't seem to, tie in with our approach and attitude to, well, women.
In research institutes, what is the proportion like?
It would be of the order of 20 to 25% now.
25%.
It's growing, but it grows unevenly across disciplines. Biology, of course, is maybe even more than 50%.
Okay.
As the engineering disciplines are not. And surprisingly, a discipline like chemistry has very few women in it.
So I really see a poor link between Make in India campaign and strengthening research and development area, because this area is not very much emphasized. By calling world-class companies, companies world over, come do it India. And most of the things, it is like assembling.
If you look at how most developing countries have developed in the world, it all starts with exports, because the purchasing power in the country is very low, therefore the internal market is very small. When we were small, Japanese markets, everybody is saying this is all bad. They were making toys first, then they went to radio, they went to television, etc. And once you start making that for exports, the companies then make some profits, they pay taxes, and then you also make it easy for multinationals to come and set up manufacturing activities in the country. So you create jobs, you create employment for people. Once you create employment for people, they have disposable income, they start buying, they start paying taxes, then the corporations paying taxes, so therefore the country has a little bit more money, and then they look at all these research and all of that. That's how China has done. China first started doing simple things. Today China invests so much in their educational institutions that we are no comparison for that. Therefore, I think we'll have to study what other countries have done, and we will have to follow the path. But we in India, we don't want to learn from anybody. We think we know everything under the sun. We know solutions to all the problems, and that we alone are the people who know that. I think if we take that attitude, we will never. That's the biggest problem. The speed of decision making, the non-involvement of experts in those decision making, ideology coming in the way of doing what is best, relegating meritocracy to the back burner, bringing the issue of regions, caste and religion, all of these into decision making. I think these are the things that have kept us back.
I know there are lots of questions, but we're going to let the panelists get back to making in India. They're doing that. You are the future, you will be doing that. Thank you so much for joining us here on this show. We've been talking about Make in India and its relevance for Indian science, and the need to get Indian science right up there at the top where it certainly can be. Thank you for joining us.